Hey, friends, thanks for listening to the Christian Education and Leadership Podcast. Today's episode is Rethinking Academics in Christian Schools, Part 5 Biblical Integration in the Classroom. In the first 4 parts of this series, we explored the shifting academic landscape, challenged long-standing assumptions about teaching and learning, and introduced practical structures like small group and station rotation models to better meet the needs of today's students. Before we move further into standards, assessments, or instructional design, it's essential to pause and revisit the foundation. Christian schools exist to disciple students, to shape their hearts and minds to know and follow Jesus. Because formation is the mission. Biblical worldview integration isn't optional or supplemental. It is the way Christian education was designed to function. My primary concern is that Christian schools leave the bulk of the Christian school discipleship experience to chapels, camps, and spiritual life, and forget that students spend more than 90% of their time in the classroom while on their school campus. Here is where many schools get stuck. Teachers are told to integrate a biblical worldview, but they aren't shown how to do it or how to connect it meaningfully to actual standards, skills, and content. Photo by Aaron Burden on Unsplash. The mindset shift. Integration is not an add-on. In many classrooms, biblical worldview integration is an opening or closing prayer, a brief devotion or testimony, a scripture verse on a bulletin board. These are good things and we should keep doing them. However, they are not biblical worldview integration. True integration happens when we look at the curriculum, standards, skills, and unit objectives and ask ourselves, what does the Bible say about this? If you remember only one thing from this article, it is to begin asking biblical questions. Ask them all of the time. Bring biblical inquiry to your classroom and for discussion, exploration, and discovery, not in a forced way, not by stapling scripture onto content, but by recognizing that all truth is God's truth, and therefore every academic discipline rests on biblical foundations. The process can be simple. Evaluate the standard or learning target. Ask a biblical question connected to the concept. Answer it from scripture. Design activities that help students learn both the academic skill and the biblical truth. I recommend that this happens at the unit level, especially when you're starting out in this process. Come up with one biblical worldview question per unit and plan for it accordingly. Therefore, you'll have explored 5 to 10 key biblical questions with answers and learning activities over the course of the school year. A simple, repeatable framework for teachers. Here is a sample biblical worldview table teachers could build for each unit. You could use Magic School, ChatGPT, or other AI models to help you with a draft before you make your own edits. I chose some 7th grade ELA standards as an example. Sample 7th grade ELA Biblical Integration Chart. This model is clear, practical, and academically rigorous. It respects learning targets. It fosters deep biblical connections. It produces meaningful learning activities. It avoids superficial or cheesy integration. More importantly, this allows you, like any other essential question, to continually come back to your biblical worldview question throughout your unit. Why this is so important right now. As classrooms shift toward more personalized, differentiated, and small group learning, Part 4, teachers may worry that integrating a biblical worldview will be harder. In reality, it becomes easier because small groups allow deeper conversations. Teacher-led stations give space to connect scripture to real skills. Projects and hands-on tasks open doors for reflection and comparison. Final word. Biblical worldview integration is not a spiritual ornament on top of academic content. It is the content because it frames every academic pursuit within God's story, God's truth, and God's design for His world. As Christian educators, we should approach integration with the same rigor and clarity that we bring to teaching standards, analyzing data, or designing small group rotations. My prayer is that students would begin to see the Bible as both relevant and resourceful when thinking about math, ELA, science, or any subject for that matter, especially when biblical literacy is at or near an all-time low. It also makes for more honest biblical worldview integration. In other words, we don't force answers to questions to sound spiritual. For example, if you're teaching about macroeconomics, zoom out of the lesson and think about the larger scene, you might have an essential unit question as follows. How do big economic forces like growth, inflation, and employment shape everyday life for individuals and society? Think about a biblical question. How does the Bible teach us to respond when economic forces like inflation, scarcity, or unemployment create uncertainty or hardship in society? This type of integration makes me hopeful for what Christian education, at its best, can become.